Time it takes to be able to diagnose something appropriately and to treat it appropriately can have long-standing ramifications.
Everyone really wanted to feel as if they were empowered to do something.
I'm not a doctor, I'm not in healthcare. It wasn't obvious what I could really do. And then this call to action for analytics, for data science came.
You know, we're creating AI tools that are able to start parsing through the large amounts of data that a normal human could never go through and find relationships that we didn't even know existed.
AI can empower physicians all over the world to give the same amount of care to everyone, regardless of where they were born, regardless of their socioeconomic status. That's always been the promise of AI.
Time is critical. I mean, this was in early mid-March. The impact of the virus was largely unknown.
The longer time it takes to be able to diagnose something appropriately and to treat it appropriately can have long-standing ramifications.
They had hundreds of questions they wanted answers to, and they were very specific. For example, how long does the virus live on metal or plastic or natural fibers? What comorbidities are there? What age ranges have what types of symptoms?
Time is critical. I mean, this was in early mid-March. The impact of the virus was largely unknown.
In a pandemic, time is very valuable, and most first world countries have access to teams of scientists and experts that they can turn to who know, here's what we do know but isn't published. But what about, all those in, middle and low income countries who don't have those, panels of experts and scientists they can turn to? It's really important to have a way to know what current consensus or knowledge looks like, and they should be able to have access to the same information.
With COVID-19, the rate of publication around COVID-19 and coronaviruses has just been really incredible this year, right? Like there's several hundred new papers being released every day since the start of March. And for clinicians and public health experts who are kind of trying to propose the right ways to treat patients, the right ways to triage patients in hospitals, to manage resources, things like that. It's very hard to find the answers when there's 300 new research papers every day.
Many hospitals and clinics had no real protocols in place. So it was kind of just fire at will and hope something sticks until there's real protocols established. I mean, hospitals within one city would often have different protocols on how they treat the same exact patient because there was no consensus. So you needed a way to be able to aggregate all the different information coming out and, present I don't want to say united front because, there is always questions within the literature on what's valid and what's not valid, but at least give people the best knowledge that we have right now.
The longer time it takes to be able to diagnose something appropriately and to treat it appropriately can have long-standing ramifications. Whereas if you find the problem early and you're able to treat it early, then you could potentially eliminate all the problems downstream.
So you could take all the time in the world to go through these journal articles, but AI could do it faster for you.
Yeah, I think we hear about this kind of thing a lot, that AI is going to take over the world and we're going to lose control of this technology.
So of course, machine learning is not going to replace humans as like biological beings, but it might replace pieces of work that are mundane, and you have to do it many, many times, and it doesn't require higher level decision making.
I think the things that people don't want to do is read 10,000 articles and then decide that none of them are relevant or one of them is relevant. Instead, what we should have people focus on is asking the right questions.
The purpose of COVID-19 was really to identify if artificial intelligence could help augment researchers trying to find the causes of COVID-19 and therapeutics and treatments and diagnostics for COVID-19. So it was really able to evaluate how all of the amass of information that was coming out from all over the world in real time and see if AI could evaluate and help myself and other MDs and PhDs that were on the front line and that were doing research, see if we could expedite the knowledge we were gaining from all this research in a very concise manner.
So the data set for the COVID-19 challenge is a collection of structured machine readable papers that was derived from several different sources.
I know how to take a lot of unstructured data and find value and meaning in it, and that's exactly what the White House is asking us to do. So I was excited, like it felt like I could finally do something and help during a really crazy time. Data can really be divided into two categories, structured and unstructured. What structured data is it's data, sometimes called like metadata, but it's data that you can think of as perhaps like computer generated. So when you send an email, the structured data on it is the to, the from, the time, the date. The unstructured data would be the authored content, the stuff you write in a body that is a lot harder for a computer to understand because it doesn't have a label on it.
And we took papers from these various sources, identified the ones that were relevant to coronaviruses and COVID-19, and then processed those papers into a structured format. So the thing that we were trying to do is convert it into a format that then these machine learning folks and data science folks can analyze very quickly.
What is data science? I don't know. What is data science?
What is it? Data scientist is a very good question.
Data scientist for me would be a person that has the skills to be able to process and understand big data sets and try to gain new insights of this data by using now machine learning algorithms or AI approaches.
So data science is a discipline at the intersection of three different fields. At the intersection of statistics, machine learning, and computer programming. So we're actually quite generalists, and we use tools from all of these fields to provide business value, to make predictions, and to analyze the data. Kaggle is a data science community that provides a lot of learning resources for practicing data scientists and people who want to get into the field. So they'll put these challenges on there, like here's a data set and here's what you need to solve, but show your work, show all of your code and your methods and your rationale, and they really value that collaboration and that sharing.
The first thing I did was try to assemble a team of medical students, residents, attending physicians on the medical side, and then on the research side, graduate students, postdocs, and PIs, and say, okay, let's get a solid scientific backing so that the work that the data scientists are doing is actually relevant and helpful. From the time we started to the time we ended, there were probably at least 300 different researchers within the medical research community, and they all ranged from I'm a resident who was 4 weeks on in the hospital, 4 weeks off. I'd love to do something in the 4 weeks that I'm off to help. A lot of PIs and researchers had their labs closed down due to lack of PPE. In order to conserve PPE, they have a very good understanding of how research is conducted. Once again, how do I leverage my talents to help in the current pandemic?
I'm not a doctor, I'm not in healthcare. It wasn't obvious what I could really do. And then this call to action for analytics, for data science came, and it absolutely paid to the strengths of myself and my coworkers. And it felt really great and empowering that we could do something to help out.
The CalGo project was a collaboration between many organizations and many data scientists outside of Relativity as well. So everybody was remote, kind of like on a massive global scale. There was a good amount of European representation too.
Bună, mă numesc Gabriel Preda, sunt data scientist la Endava și Kernel Grandmaster. I'm a data scientist by day and a Kegler by night. And I thought how I can assist all these guys in their effort just to create a small tool to accelerate the processing of some of the data sources.
I'm José Meseguer. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Edinburgh University. I'm currently working with stem cell-derived liver models. When I became involved into that project was I did over this summer a data science bootcamp, and a part of that bootcamp was to perform a capstone project.
The data scientists would go through and try to create a table or some sort of mock-up of here are the answers we found.
So then you could use that to start finding links between the terms that they were describing with, for example, genes that were expressed or they were reported on the abstract and drugs. And with the hope for use that database in downstream applications. It was just try to help to process these 50,000 papers that can be published within a month, because most of the global research effort now is in COVID. So it's quite hard to read all of that.
And the researchers would go back and refine it, and there'd just be this iterative process that they'd go back and forth trying to find the happy medium.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
No. I think we're going to be inside a little bit longer than 2 months.
There was a sense of a broader mission, and a lot of people who wanted to go even beyond what the CalGo organizers were setting as the deadlines and the goals to provide a whole database or a knowledge base, like a machine learning built knowledge base of journal articles. We found 4,000 duplicate articles, which I think in the version of the data set we were working with was roughly 7 or 8% of the articles, so a good amount. Deduplication is not glamorous, but it's important because if you don't understand the type of duplication you have, or you don't deduplicate, then you have bias in your data. For example, maybe one document is repeated 50 times, and so its weight in the data set is 50 times more than any other article, but you don't know why that is. So if you don't understand the bias in your data, then you can't do an honest analysis.
If you don't have clean data, then your result, whatever you're doing, cannot be trusted.
I think some of the biggest problems we still have in medicine is that a lot of the research that we're doing or a lot of the decisions that we have made have been based on biased data in certain respects. The data sets that we've had tend to come classically, especially in high-income countries like the United States that are at the forefront of research, from one socioeconomic group, one ethnic group, and one gender. For the most part, it tends to be white males that dominate a lot of the research, and this has been going on for really decades. Well, then if you took someone else from a different gender or a different ethnicity and tried to apply that data set over, it would misdiagnose the patient simply because they had the wrong gender or they had the wrong ethnicity. And I think AI in the short term has the risk of multiplying those biases, but in the long term has the potential to remedy those biases by being able to identify where they may be and be able to pull it in.
My reasons for wanting to do this, I think, harken back to my motivation and why I got into data science to begin with, wanting to help out something bigger than myself, something, for our communities. This was very much aligned with that. And I think the urgency and the global scale of it, working with people from across the world, was also exciting.
I mean, certainly the cause of COVID-19 is a big one. So like everyone really wanted to feel as if they were empowered to do something and to contribute.
I think COVID-19 serves as a really good example of what can be done when you are able to leverage other communities.
Back in March, I think we knew very little about how to treat the virus, how it's even transmitted, what happened, like if you have other underlying conditions, how you respond to the virus. These were completely open questions. And now we have answers. Some of them are preliminary answers for some of those questions, and we're trying to ask new questions.
There are almost 100 papers that have cited the data set. There have been a number of other data sets that have been published that use the COVID-19 data set, and those are real indicators that the data set is being used in actual research.
That when we look at medical practice and healthcare in the future, there's just going to be way more data.
Data is really a new resource. It's the new oil. And so people are looking to harvest data for all capacities because they understand that with data, you can create avatars, you can create schemas, and you can really identify how the world ends up moving and developing in so many different aspects. And when you can do that, you can really shape things how you want them.
Sorting through all the different types of data and finding the right piece of data at the right time to make the right decision. That is a challenge, and that's something we're getting better at, not only just in the medical world, but also, we're creating AI tools that are able to start parsing through the large amounts of data that a normal human could never go through and find relationships that we didn't even know existed. How can we leverage data from all over the world, bring it together so that we can actually come up with insights faster, the same way we did with COVID-19. Why can't we take the same exact approach that we're taking here during a pandemic for something that's readily infectious and apply that to non-communicable diseases?
One of the recent drugs, the immunotherapy for rheumatoid arthritis, which just came out 2 or 3 days ago, was found that it could reduce mortality in severe patients by almost 70 to 80%. And that drug was one of the original drugs that was identified by artificial intelligence. AI can empower physicians all over the world to give the same amount of care to everyone, regardless of where they were born, regardless of their socioeconomic status. That's always been the promise of AI. 100 years from now, or not even 20 or 50 years from now, if you ask your kids what's the typical tool that a doctor uses, I believe artificial intelligence will be their answer, as opposed to if you ask someone today what's the typical tool, most likely something like a stethoscope might be their answer. So those things will change over time, and I believe artificial intelligence will help us to get there. And we have systemic inequalities in all over the world. We know this, and I believe that artificial intelligence can play a role in hoping to ameliorate those inequalities. But we first have to be honest and identify them, and then try to use these new tools to help democratize medicine, to be able to give healthcare to all. Everyone has a right to be healthy. Everyone has a right to live a very long and fruitful life. I believe that. I believe that's something that we should aspire to. And if we have the ability, then why don't we do it?
Time was critical. I mean, this was in early mid-March. The impact of the virus was largely unknown. This was in early mid-March. The impact of the virus was